Welcome to another episode of Packet Party with me, Vlad, and my co-host Fred. Today's episode is part 2 of our series with Scott Williamson from Thousand Eyes. Now in part 1, we discussed digital experience monitoring and why you should care about it. But in today's show, we kind of took a little bit of a special route with it. We take a trip down memory lane as Scott walks us through his career, from PLCs to Novell, Windows 3.1 to Cisco iOS. He reminds us not only of how technology has evolved, but the skills that kept him going. You'll hear all about Scott's career evolution and his advice to you, our listeners, who are looking to perhaps take that next step in your career journey and make it that much more rewarding. Now, let's get into the show. All right, so now we're here for part 2 with our friend Scott. So in this episode, we're going to be covering a little bit more around his career journey, where he started, where he's been, where he is now. Try to go through a little bit of, what it's like to actually get into technology sales. And for those of you out there who are, perhaps running the show at your local school or retail store, some place of business, but maybe you're considering a career change, Scott has hopefully got some good advice for us today on how you can make that change.
Or as I'd like to call it, how did Scott come to become Scott? And how to be... Yeah, well, just for everyone's information, I've gotten to know Scott over the past 5 or 6 years now, since coming to Australia. And probably one of the things that I've picked up on with the community that I'm surrounded by, community of solution engineers. And Scotty's one of the guys who's I categorize under grumpy old men. It's probably because, working too long in the industry, you kind of develop an appetite for it. And tell you what, Scotty is kind of one of those grumpy old men that I want to grow up to become, just because I want to get away with it. And but kidding aside, if you ever get into a meeting with a customer and Scott's in there, there's always something. You always expect something fun to come out of it. Like, he could be the most pleasant and menial and gentle person you talk to, or he can call you out on your BS and tell you you're full of it. So there's always something fun unexpected and fun that will come out of that conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Fred. It makes my head swell. But yeah, there's nothing like the truth.
Absolutely. So, Scotty, I guess just can you give us a brief rundown or at least a brief overview of how you started your career, how your career journey has kind of taken turns, leave no stone unturned, give us all and everything that you think we'd want to know.
Yeah. So, first up, and this has caused me lots of grief in my life, is that I don't have a tertiary qualification, so I haven't gone to university and studied IT. Well, IT wasn't even a thing you could study in the 90s. It was called computer science. Instead, I didn't go to uni because of financial pressure around the family, that kind of stuff. Back then, things like HECS and all that kind of stuff didn't exist under certain eligibility for some people, so I couldn't afford to really go. So I did an apprenticeship in electronics in there, and during my electronics apprenticeship, we had to choose between doing analog electronics, fixing old TVs with cathode ray tubes and boring stuff like that, or doing digital electronics. And digital electronics was kind of reasonably new then. Not reasonably new, it was sort of new as that sort of trade to repair stuff back when we used to repair electronics, which we don't do anymore. We just throw it out and buy another one. So I did digital electronics, which was much easier. And the reason why I chose that path is that analog has infinite states, where digital only has 2 states, on or off. So it makes it much easier to fix. Back in those days, I was fixing things like Commodore 64s, Amigas, Z80 processors and 6800 processor stuff. So you could actually use a thing called a logic probe, which has red and green flashing LEDs on it to actually work out the state of memory chips and that kind of stuff. You can't anymore, because back then you're 8 megahertz. Like your eye can, sorry, 8 hertz. Your eye could 8 megahertz. Yeah, you could actually sort of see the flickering correctly inside there. Then after a few years doing that kind of stuff, I ended up working in a business systems company, photocopiers, that kind of stuff, repairing. So I was doing board level repairs of 286s and just starting on 386s, but they were hard to repair because they're multi-layer boards, so they're easier to break than to fix. But in that, and then board jockeying came along where we just video card was broken, so you just threw it out. Whereas before that we would have been replacing the integrated circuits on those with surface mount soldering and that kind of stuff. I could see that this electronic side, when we started board jockeying, was kind of like, no, that's not going to go very far. So the company I was working with, we were doing a bit of networking back then, rolling out 10 base 2, doing Novell networking. There was little one customer had Token Ring, which was pretty fancy. But doing network, so Novell networking. So I'm a Novell CNE in 312 and 4.
Nice.
Probably means nothing nowadays because no one even knows who Novell are. And then when
you had to roll out those coaxial cables too.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it kept you employed. And then after I did Novell stuff, this Windowsy thing came on, NT351, and those sort of things. And I think I spent my whole time migrating Novell networks to Windows networks, because the main reason is that it was on the Sunshine Coast where I did this, and all the legal firms didn't want to dedicate a PC to be the server for your Novell networking. They wanted the PC to be on the receptionist desk and the receptionist use it, and it was also the server, which Windows NT allowed them to do. I think that's the main reason. So we just get that, plug it in, run 10 base 2 around the company, T pieces, terminators, off you go. Then it came down to Brizzy working in a basically a service department of a distributor. So it was probably my first hint into sales. So a company called QSoft, which don't exist anymore, but they were a disty, IT disty, so they were Microsoft and bit of Novell. No one was buying it by then, sort of drying up in Australia, that kind of stuff. And so we were responsible for all the service equipment there, as well as setting up stuff like that's where I did my first internet link. It was dial-up for our Exchange server. That would have been like Exchange 4 or something like that. Might even had a number then. It might have been that. So Microsoft Mail. Previous to that we had a X-file based system. Then we went to Microsoft system. So that was like the first internet link that we had, and then we moved to ISDN. So that was pretty fancy. Then I went off contracting for a few years and kind of ended up doing more networking than server side, because I just felt networking, well, I'm lazy, so networking seemed to be a lot easier than servers, because you can only configure routers a certain way. So I did worked on Cisco 1600 series routers and switches and that kind of stuff back then, and then worked for a different gas company that got bought by a company called Energex, which was which is a power company, a power distributor in Queensland. In there, I kind of became the network team lead, running their networking, upgrading all their environment. Getting involved a little bit of power systems control in there as well, because that's all serial comms. And my background, I had a good understanding of serial comms, RS485, RS232, all that kind of stuff, and helping them tunnel that over IP network. So using the IP network as a mux to tunnel serial comms over there way before its time. And the Energex systems that had in there, their PC SAC systems and that, which won't mean anything to anyone unless they're a proper nerd in power industry. Were well ahead of their time for that.
Was there at any point that you've had to you're already taking care of the network? Did you end up having to, dust off some of that old skills in board jockeying that you said, having to test out?
Definitely. That fault finding skill you learn from that, because, someone drops a thing on your desk and say, this is broken, fix it. What's it doing? It's got wavy lines on the screen, or doesn't boot. That troubleshooting, fault finding, breaking everything in half and working out, well, it's not in this half of the componentry, it must be in the other half. breaking that in half down to try and work out where the problem is. If it wasn't something you already knew about, because if you fix lots of stuff, you sort of go, oh, it flashes the green light 3 times and makes this beep, so that has to be memory chip, for example. Let's just go and replace them first before I even diagnose it. 9 times out of 10, you fix it. So any sort of troubleshooting comes back to that. Like even in Energex, like when I took over that environment, there's still 10 base 5 in their thicknet, as well as 10 base 2, and they're only just starting to roll out Cat 5 in their environments. So this is, around 2000, I suppose, that was starting to roll out. So, but all that older cabling, there's a lot of fault finding in that. Like, because people used to, I'm moving my desk with my PC today. They just unplug the 2 coax cables, take their PC somewhere else with the T-piece and the terminator with them, or the T-piece, and then all of a sudden the whole floor had no network. And so you'd be up there trying to work out where it is, so you could kind of use your multimeter or something to work out the resistance of each way and then work out at least which way to go and kind of stuff. So those fault finding things are still there.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of that kind of stuff. And then a lot of their old power system stuff, their old PDP-11s and that too, they were very homegrown and home built. So having that skill set allowed you to sort of understand how they worked in there. Yeah, then I went to, sorry.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I guess you're saying that back then there was a lot more walking and physical activity involved in an IT role. Nowadays, the only exercise that we get are our fingers and probably our arms when it's stiffened up.
Yeah, apart from Telnet, you couldn't just, even some of your software upgrades you wanted to be on site because, you didn't know what they were going to do. Are they going to wipe the config? Does the thing need a power cycle after? There was always a lot of that stuff in there. Yeah. So then I sort of stayed in the power industry with them, and then went worked for a transmission company for a while and helping with their substation automation design, which is a design manual for the substation, turning the power off and on, big power in the back, high voltage. In the back end of that, helping them design the IT systems behind that to do that. And that really becomes from understanding the user's requirements. Like they had a list of things I needed to do to make this network work. It had to have these certain parameters. So therefore you had to break all the my IT network design skills in there, and then, implement an environment that suited their requirements, a lot more rings and those sort of horrible things. Really understanding things like spanning tree, not using proprietary protocols, which means vendor agnostic. So all that kind of, so getting really heavy into that. And I did that for a few years, and then an opportunity came to come to Cisco, and I thought I had no hope of doing that. So I applied for the role thinking, I'll give it my best shot, and ended up, and then that's back when, it wasn't called IoT then, it wasn't even OT.
Internet of Everything, was it?
No, that was later on. It was
okay.
Just like industrial networking or something back then. Yeah, industrial networking, I think it was. So,
right. Okay.
And there was energy, and then the rest of them, manufacturing, they were all different. So I sort of came into Cisco with that skill set, I suppose, and then from there, journey as an account SE, focusing on IoT. Then after that, must be like 6 years of that. 6-7 years of account SE, different roles, public sector, enterprise, covering a little bit of commercial here and there. So it's the smaller customers, big customers, and public sector. Then wanted to change, so opportunity came up to go into the cloud networking business, or commonly known as Meraki. And I applied for that, thinking the same thing. I got no hope of getting this, but was able to convince them that I was employable. And been quite successful in that sort of side of it. And then now in Thousand Eyes, again, I think I was Meraki for 4 years, which, when you look at, people of my age, some of those people that I worked with in some of those power industries, they left uni and started at those companies. They're still there today. Right. And it's pretty common, sort of like our parents' age to work in 1 or 2 companies your whole life, whereas nowadays it seems to be that. I think 2 years is too short, but that 4 years you actually give a few years back to the business. In that, and then it's like, what's my next challenge? What's my next opportunity? Once I perfected the job, what's next? Or once I worked out I'm hopeless at it, what's next?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go from there. Yeah, so that's sort of like a summary. Going from pure technical design, knowing that kind of stuff, I always into sales. I'm probably preempting your question. Into sales was interesting. It did really worry me. But when you're in any organisation, once you're helping write business cases to upgrade the entire network for a power company, that's multiple millions of dollars. You have to go and sell that, right? So you got to go and sell that with facts and all that information to help the board and the CEO and that sign off on that. That's kind of like no different in sales. It's just it's a different scale. Where if you've got a crap product and you're trying to sell it, you probably can sell it. If you've got a good product, it's much easier to position and sell with that. But then the good product's normally going to be more expensive. So then it's all about business justification, value selling, and all those sorts of things. But yeah, moving on to that side always worries. It still worries me today. Like I always got worried that once I'd been in Cisco for a few years, am I ever any good as a hands-on engineer anymore? Technical design, that kind of stuff, because you kind of just talking to people.
Yeah. No, that's interesting that you mentioned that. But before we kind of get into that really juicy stuff there, I mean, with the summary that you've kind of described to us earlier, I think you offer a unique perspective into what the technology demands were from that time to 30 years after. Over that span of time, how have you seen the changes in what has much remained the same over that period of time?
IPv4 is still here.
Slowly going away. IPv6 is slowly taking over the world.
Yeah, we don't see it. It's hidden. The change, like from an application side and that networking side, like you got to remember back when we first had email, no one really cared. They check it once a week, that kind of stuff. Now, email doesn't work. It's a critical system, So applications have got far more important to businesses. That I think we call it the digitization of businesses, where it gets to a point now that if the digital systems don't work, then the company can't function. As I talked about in the last episode, I think about a retail store. Their single box fails, the whole store can't do transaction. They obviously can't take cash because no one knows how to work out change anymore if they have a float. So but their redundancy is different stores, so it's a different way of kind of looking at it. So is that kind of analogy across that, I suppose.
Yeah, that's good. And over that period of time, you've had a few shifts in your career. What are some of the things that you kind of did to make sure that you stay relevant, up to date? I mean, this is a common concern among young folks nowadays, is that, am I still relevant? Am I going to lose my job? Is AI going to take over my job? That's always, I guess it's human nature, right? But seeing as, one thing I've managed to take away from your story is that it doesn't matter how outdated your knowledge is. At some point, the discipline and the knowledge and somehow the muscle memory that you've picked up from those past experiences will still serve you as you go in your career. But what are your thoughts? What did you do to kind of keep up and make sure that you're still sharp?
Yeah, look, I guess lots of training, but understanding that training, because we get anyone can go and read a book, pass an exam. You can rote learn. I'm hopeless at rote learning. I've got to be a hands-on, practical person at doing that. So, in my whole life, a lot of it's been hands-on modelling, doing that, putting that time aside for that. In the earlier days, I suppose, it was having all the right certifications. Because I'm not having university qualifications. I don't have like a thing. It's like, I've got, all those different other certifications around companies you wouldn't have heard of anymore. 3Com and Synoptics
3Com.
and, Novell, like I said, Cisco, Picture which you've probably never heard of. Again, it's a video conferencing company. There's all these different things, but having those certifications used to help. Definitely keep those doors open. The Cisco certifications are probably the strongest in that, because they're kind of recognised by everyone. When other competitors say, well, you just got to do this one exam and we'll give you that same level of certification with us, it's got, well, it must be good. In there, I won't say bad things about that. I was just kind of thinking about the way the exams are written now. Kind of annoys me. They're written, what's the most correct answer? No, what is the correct answer? I help.
Interestingly, what I've heard, you were part of a working task force or a working team that provided questions to the certification exams.
Yeah. That's the joys of working somewhere big, is that you can put your hand up. It's you don't get paid any extra for it, but you can help both read through or mark or review the current questions that people write and that kind of stuff. I think what's kept me relevant too is understanding how to search. Is also key, and that's where AI is. Well, I don't know if it's really AI, but being able to chat with something and to get answers back. The wrong question gives you the wrong answer. It's that simple. Mm-hmm. And understanding that machine, the same with searching, the internet or anything, is that it only knows certain answers. And if they're wrong, if the port back to monitoring and, active user monitoring, if you've got poor data, you're going to have poor answers, so it's that. So it's also using this rare skill that I think we have now called common sense to actually go, I like that answer, but that sounds too far-fetched, so it's being able to do that, we're solutions engineers, or used to be systems engineers, or SE search engineers. Get good at having a repertoire. Okay, I'll Google it first, I'll search on the internet first, then I'll use this, then I'll use that, then I'll go and look in here, then I'll search internal systems and Reddit and that kind of stuff. Reddit's probably about 10% accurate, but search for all that. The amount of bud that gets spread around too. I don't know how you fix that, but so that's probably what's kept me relevant, is that sort of training element, or just reading a lot, hands-on, 100% hands-on. And the best way to do hands-on is in a production environment with real kit. In a lab, if you break it, you don't understand. There's not the slap, So we've all had those angels of darkness moments, I think we used to call them. So,
to kind of qualify that statement, Scott is not suggesting that you tinker around with production, playing around in production networks.
Not without a change request, Fred.
I was say most people's production networks are their test networks, because they can't usually afford both, right? But
but the emulators and that kind of stuff we have nowadays, is so much better than what we used to have. Being able to run ESX on a NUC or on your laptop and run multiple images and download pirated software and have multiple routers running on there. It's sort of like you're resourceful. If you care about that change, not going to break things, then you're going to test it somehow, Yeah.
So I guess I've got one takeaway so far from this entire story, is that over, 30 years, so much still has changed from a technology perspective. Novell came and went. Windows 3.1 came and went, 95, 2000, so on and so forth. Cisco 1600 routers and now 8000 routers. If you think the software's changed, which means the CLI has changed. But what seems to be the one thing that's consistent throughout all of this is, I guess, your own personal skills around, say time management, the ability to talk, the ability to analyze, the ability to troubleshoot, regardless of what CLI or what thing is present in front of you. It's these sort of other more soft
real intelligence, I think is what you call it. RI.
Yeah.
Being able to pick them apart, right? Like understanding. It's like troubleshooting that board. You kind of cut it in half, try to pick it apart and understand where the problem lies, isolating it. Yeah.
And that can't, you can learn some of that, but by doing it, by practicing it, you can get experience. Like I could go off and I want to be a project manager next week, go off and do my PM BOK or whatever it's called now, course, doesn't make me a good project manager until I've run multiple projects, and probably learnt more if I failed in some of those. Like you probably learn more from your failures than you do from your successes. Like if you do one of those uncontrolled change in a production environment and something goes whoopee, you learn more from that than if you do that uncontrolled change when you're going to remotely upgrade something and it works straight away. It's like, I learned nothing. You always have a backout plan, all that kind of stuff. Reload in 15 minutes, then go and make the change. You always do that kind of stuff. When you're having those unscheduled, approved changes. So
And my takeaway from that is, I'm an advocate of that same mindset, which is continuous learning. Like never think for a second that just because you're out of school, and in this case, Scotty's did not even bother with a university degree, but that hunger for learning, that drive for learning anything new, not being afraid to make mistakes, that is definitely something that, and you would agree, that's probably something that kind of drove you forward.
Yeah, it'd be much easier if I had done a degree because the door's already open when you apply for roles. Opening that door sometimes can be hard when you don't have it. So
that's right.
I'm not saying don't do it.
So don't lose hope if you weren't able to do it.
Finish your course.
Finish your course.
And don't fail any subjects because it costs you more in HEX.
That'll give you a head start at least.
Yeah.
So, shifting gears here a little bit, Vlad, and one of the things that, one of the more interesting points that Scotty mentioned there earlier was being able to contribute to, say, a business plan or a technology plan that leads to, some kind of business relevance. And I've been witness to this one. This is not verbatim, but I've heard somebody talk about Scotty in such a way that, he's the only person in the room who can flip or can switch a hat between like really deep engineering stuff. And then he turns around and talk to the CIO and, talk about these business related stuff and why it's relevant for the business. And you would agree with me, Vlad, our role as solutions engineer, we're kind of that bridge that acts between technology and business. And it's kind of almost a given that we should understand how both sides of the world think and behave and how we're able to kind of get them meeting in the middle. So, Scotty, how did that come about? Like, how do we even start with, building that business acumen and understanding how one thing would seem relevant to a person who's listening? Does he care about the technology or does he care about the business? How did that go about for you?
Yeah, look, I guess it comes from failures. So going in and asking for, we need X dollars to upgrade our router fleet, and to me it's just non-negotiable. These are 8-year, 10-year-old routers. They got to get upgraded, and then you go to the IT manager. They go, what's wrong with them? Why can't you get another few years out of them? It's like, well, here's what's going to happen. They're going to fail. They're going to do this, that. But they're not failing yet. It's like, so they won't even endorse you to go up to the next level to get that approval for funding. So it's like, okay, so I've asked the wrong question of this person. I've got to put it into more business relevance where I've got to start to build like a mini case where I've got to go and say, rather than saying, hey, I need some money to replace some routers, it's like, if we don't replace these routers by this time, then this is the impact to the business, which we know it will because, as electronics gets older, its failure rate, MTBF increases, that kind of stuff. You start pulling in those sort of stats and, information, especially then supportability. If we go past this date, then we can't get, especially nowadays, security patching. For them, that probably didn't really matter in the 2000s. We're just too busy winding back our clocks. But where it becomes like if everything's not, if something isn't security compliant now and it caused an issue with the company, then C-level people can go to jail, whereas we didn't have that before. But building that business case, what's the impact to the business? What's the impact to the users? both financially and in time, and relating that back to, hey, I need this technology spent inside with believable figures and numbers inside there, finding those compelling things. So I guess mine comes from actually being in the customer world, running those environments, asking for that money, or that investment in that technology for an outcome for the business inside there. So when I'm in a meeting now, I do the same thing. I get frustrated in some meetings because even the customer doesn't think that way. It's like, but why would you spend that much on that product when it's going to make no difference to your organisation? But whatever, Yeah. So yeah, does that help with that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's, it's a very interesting perspective you offer there. And I guess, again, it goes back to don't be afraid to make a mistake. Nobody, I mean, I've struggled with it for a few years myself. Nobody starts out really good at both. The good thing is you just have to be aware that there's a possible avenue to be better at your role just because you understand two different domains of knowledge.
It's not even one of your kids, Fred. If they come to you and say, "Can I please have $10?" you go, "No." Then they'll come back and ask you another question. So either they'll wear you down, or they'll ask it in a way that you go, "Yeah, no worries. Here's your $10. Now you've told me what you want it for, or whatever." So that's probably a very simple analogy.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Can I have $10, Fred?
No.
Please.
I'm gonna raid your beer fridge for $10. Anyway, so another really interesting topic, and Vlad, you're gonna like this one. Scotty is a big proponent of the value selling mindset because let's be honest here, the products that we're selling isn't exactly the cheapest one in the truck, but this is something that I've learned, and somehow I've built my narrative around value rather than looking at the price tag. So what can you tell us about this, Scotty?
Well, the value selling is going to come from, if I really simplify it, probably oversimplify it, is obviously talking to the customer to understand their environment and their pain points. What are the problems you're having, what's going on inside there. Then, going on their story, if they start telling you about something especially something that's recently happened, you just go along with that story. So then it's their story. And then you pretty much just take that and just play it back to them. As long as, the pain is higher than the value, I guess, in a way, or the value to the customer, or the pain is higher than the cost, then everyone's, no one would say no. If your house keeps getting broken into by a burglar every week, and I come along to you and then it's costing you $5,000 a week every time they break in, I come around to you and try and sell you a security system for $100,000. You're like, no. But if I come around to you with a payment plan of $1,000 a week because you're losing $5,000 a week, you probably go, oh, well, that's a fifth. Mm-hmm. That's considerable, and that's kind of, how do you break it down? How do you do that? It's pretty. It just came to my head, that analogy. So, but it's like the same sort of thing. It's like, what's your pain? Well, I keep getting broken into. They keep breaking into my house, and it keeps costing me so much. Mm-hmm. How can I avoid it? I'm not spending $100,000 to save myself $5,000 a week, but I'm happy to. Or maybe I'd spend $1,000 to save $5,000 a week, because you can't get insured once you've been broken in that many times. That's right. You can just move house, but that kind of thing. So it's really around that pain point, identifying what they are, obviously having that great customer conversation, understanding all, because there'll be thousands of them, and they won't even know some of them until you have that chat and that discovery piece. The listening, as the people say, listening's far more powerful than talking. So summarising and playing back their own stories, or if they don't like that, is making them play back your stories. Is, if you can manage that, it's always powerful. And that's dirty sales side of what we do.
I was going to say, we've got a session, we should plan a session on MedPick one day, just to introduce non-sales people into some of the sales methodology or thought process behind. It's kind of giving away secrets, but I guess, for people who want to transition into a sales role.
Not to steal the thunder for that one, but it's really simple. There's a need which has pain. We've got to solve the pain.
That's
and
right.
You're a technical champion and economic buyer equals success. Not all the time. That's never that simple, but that's kind of like my summary for all that.
And of course, add into the mix of the power of storytelling. Like humans are emotional creatures. They respond best to stories that kind of evoke to that emotional side of it. Not many people are emotional buyers, but a lot of huge purchases involve some kind of emotion. It's just a matter of being able to tap into that.
Yeah, and people buy stuff from people too, which is why AI won't be doing all the selling for us. Because in the day, it's that relationship, especially when you're value selling. Like back to that value selling bit, I suppose, is that if I'm not selling value, then I'm on price. So you don't need me. So
Yeah,
if you're selling value, then you need me.
that makes sense. I guess for our probably second to last question, in terms of, I guess, then you've obviously made this shift into selling from non-sales through obviously learning how to position, solutions within your company and sell that on. You sell a solution on behalf of a vendor salesperson to make sure that the finance officer gives you money. That was one way that you learned how to sell. Were there any key sort of items or things that, like I know you're probably not a massive book reader, but is there something that you watched or you read or someone that inspired you that taught you around value selling early on inside of your career that, someone else outside of who's not in sales yet could, sort of take up and learn how to get into sales?
Oh, that's probably a hard one. Some of the best things that teach you about yourself and how to not. I hate that, like the books, like how to be successful, that kind of stuff. But one of the companies I worked at, it was mandatory. We all did Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But it was actually like weekly training with other people in that company. And at first you're going in their arms crossed going, this is going to be rubbish. And then you go, okay, sharpening the saw, all the acronyms, all the little sayings that they have and how that relates to what we do now. Like if I don't sharpen the saw, for example, don't ring up a customer regularly and check in on them, how they're going, and actually have empathy for them and listen to what their problems were and help them. Yeah. If I just ring them up once a year and say, hey, can you move forward your purchase of this? They go, no, Scott. Whereas if you've got that, then you've got a relationship. So that's those little things. Like Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, great book, that kind of stuff. And I don't really recommend books that often. So that one there, and because I'm not truly, I don't think I'm truly like a salesperson. I don't think that dirty. Is that simplifying that and putting it into something like that MedPick framework or medical or whatever is this week for a technical person makes it like, which stage are we in, and what do I need to do in that stage, and which stages don't I want to be part of because that's dirty selling. So
yeah, that makes sense. Cool. I appreciate the reference to a book, even though you're not necessarily a book person. That's fantastic.
I've read that one. I didn't read any of the ones at school. They made us do a review on that.
Oh,
like Wuthering Heights and that.
Still counts. Yeah, I think Vlad, I think we're probably hit time already, right? Yeah. Are we about ready to wrap this up?
I was going to say we've probably hit our closing remarks or recap of our run sheet. For anyone who listens, we actually do write run sheets to help us make sure we try to keep some sort of stable time for all of these podcasts. I think, our final question was, if I'm a sales engineer or a technology practitioner, why should I care about understanding the business side of things? But I don't know, our last session and everything we've discussed now, it kind of makes sense, right? Like, I am utilizing technology, and as a technology professional, I love technology. But at the end of the day, there is a purpose for that technology. And I guess keeping in mind what that purpose is really important when whether you're selling that technology to someone within your business or whether you are selling that technology on to someone who is another business. Would that be a succinct way of summarizing that?
Yeah. It's all customer, what's their problem? What are they trying to achieve? Very important, having that understanding what they're doing, because at the end of the day, IT is just there to support what their business does.
Love it. Did you have any other closing thoughts, words of wisdom, anything for our listeners?
Oh, put me on the spot again. Be nice to your mum. I don't know.
Something that you can help. Yeah. Something, it's really not more of something that, could help them in the span of their career to have some kind of longevity in the same way you have, or even, in the middle of a shift.
Reinvent yourself when you get bored in your job, find something interesting, make a change, do that kind of stuff. Like, don't just be the 30-year lifer that hates their job and is there every day, because if you enjoy your job, you never work a day in your life. This is sort of what I've lived to.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Good advice. You heard it here first. Be nice to your mum and reinvent yourself. I mean, look, in this day and age, technology is changing so rapidly. So there's so many options for reinventing yourself too, right? So there's no excuse not to try and do something different.
Yeah, we should have all written GPUs and be laughing. So.
We're all killing ourselves not for investing in NVIDIA earlier, right?
Well, you might be. No, I've got to keep
All right. Anyway, Scotty, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure having you in the past 2 episodes. We really love the conversation that we've had. And I hope in the future we come up with another topic that we can invite you in and, have another round of fun with you.
No worries. Thanks, Fred. Thanks, Vlad.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone.